So Boris, let's start with, Tatiana mentioned 2015 is when you guys first met. You founded the business in 2014, so there was still a young business at that point in time. Now Spryker is a global, large software business that's been very successful. What have you seen as your key challenges over the last few years?
Yeah, I think fitting maybe the theme of today, senior hiring for sure, was a big challenge for us. Also expansion to the US. I think we can double click on this one as well. And maybe not that surprisingly, but this constant notion of change, right? And that every year we would start with having our budget in place and strategy, and then something would happen, right? And things would play out differently, and kind of this constant adoption to new realities. I think this was something that I did not see coming this that much, and this was definitely a challenge.
Maybe let's start with senior hiring. You have now a complete C-suite. You have a complete VP level. But when you started, you were starting to think about the C-suite. Like, where did you start? Was it the CMO, the CRO, the CFO, the Chief Customer Officer? How did you start? And what would you change when it comes to that?
Yeah, so I think the first two C-level hires we made were the CFO and the Chief Customer Officer. I think those were the first two. I think it depends a little bit also on how the founding team looks like, right? So if you're like very sales heavy, if you're good sales marketers yourself, then you might have a little bit more time, and maybe up until the first, 5-7 million ARR, you can lead yourself. Some founders are very techy, right? So they might need sales marketers much earlier in the process. For us, it was really a good combination. So we started with establishing and building the backbone of the company, where we had all the financial, like the finance, operations, all the other functions, legal, all under the CFO we brought in, coming over from a bank, and then the Chief Customer Officer as well, because in our business, retention and expansion within the accounts was super important. So we wanted to keep our customers happy. We had many services to offer, in addition to the technology, from trading to enabling, which we also put under the Chief Customer Officer. Basically everything post sales, went under the Chief Customer Officer. So those were the first two.
If you have to pick one, you can only hire one.
Yeah.
Which one do you hire?
Again, I think for us, I think the CFO would be the one I would start with.
Why is that?
Yeah, because it frees up a lot of kind of mental capacity. Again, either you're a tech founder, like rarely you would be an operations guy, right? So a lady. So it's typically like either sales marketing heavy for yourself or tech heavy. So, and there is a lot of operations, especially in the early days, especially when you're growing fast. So if you want to free up some mental capacity, you want to have someone who just takes care of everything else that happens in the business. Then this makes a lot of sense.
Fantastic. And I mean, you just hired a phenomenal addition on the senior marketing leadership side of things. Once you have identified the right candidate that you want to close, how do you close that person?
Yeah. So first of all, I think when you bring in senior talent, then rarely they are just sitting there and waiting, right? So most probably you're getting them away from another good job, either with a company in your space, or maybe with a large incumbent competitor. So you need to be clear, and I think early on in the conversation you'll discover what really drives these people. Sometimes, and ideally, you want someone who wants to come in and really help you to really find your category and have impact. It would not be just someone who is looking for a better job and a higher salary. Would put in the legwork, would have the same level of ambition and passion. So once you understand this, I think this definitely helps kind of in closing, right? So we always try to be we always use two techniques. Like one was just bringing forward things that we thought might move the needle. For our first Chief Customer Officer, for example, he was a steak lover, and my co-founder has a farm actually, so he recorded a video with a bull on this farm saying, Chris, if you sign up, this one is for you. So we basically sent you this cow, right? And Chris was, showing this video over and over again, and he even reported back to the headhunters that, for him, like, he had many great job offers at that time, but nobody was offering a cow on top of the package. For the CMO who we just brought in, he was very passionate about racing cars, and he just got his plane license. So he was throughout the conversation, he was very excited and sharing this and how he is into racing, how he is into planes, and how he would want to have his own plane. So obviously, this was something that that in the last couple of conversations I was constantly using as a theme, saying, look, the plane is coming, and this is how we get from A to the plane, and so just kind of using this narrative. And I think it's in the end, the second thing is it needs to be a good match. So what we typically do is we try to be as approachable and personal. People would send notes. People would get back to the person saying, hey, why is it that I would appreciate you being on the team? And everyone does it with a personal message, so that this person really feels like, hey, it's not a job, but I'm joining a team. There might be different other techniques, but this serves us well so far.
We're talking about the plane. If I see a spike in GNA, when you hire, what do you over-index on? Is it experience? Is it attributes? Is it something else?
Yeah, so this is maybe a bit controversial and maybe interesting topic for after the chat here. We never hire for experience, we always hire for potential, and this is very important to us because, especially in many functions like the GTM functions, we deeply believe that, let's take sales and marketing, right? Sales and marketing of the next 5 years will have little to do with the sales and marketing of the last 10 years, right? So many things have changed in terms of roles, in terms of how AI will help, in terms of the strive for efficiency. So there are so many moving parts that people who would come in and would be very strict on just playing the playbook will most probably fail, right? Not just with us, but with many organizations. So we'd always double click on the potential and challenge them on how does a future organization look like? Challenge them on the why, right? Why would they change it? How would they see roles evolving? And really let them over and over iterate and elaborate on that. Not because we want to hear kind of the best answer, but we just want to hear that they have this open mind, and as I call it, intellectual curiosity, which I find is maybe the most important skill nowadays. If you don't have intellectual curiosity, this I think it's very, very hard for people to strive in our environment with this constant change, and it's just impossible. So we would double click on potential, intellectual curiosity, and what we call AAA criteria, which is very kind of Spryker specific, or in our case Spryker specific. So you might come up with something else, but in essence, what we did 2.5 years ago is we took all the super high performers. Typically this is easy because everyone knows them, right? So you go to every department and say, who are the absolute superstars? Everyone knows these names, right? So we took these people and we tried to distill the traits which they would all share, regardless of the functional role. So regardless of whether someone is in tech or in sales or the office manager, and regardless, very important, regardless of seniority, right? Because what you then come to is things like striving for excellence, high EQ and IQ, structured problem solving, we call it herd contributor. So someone who adds to culture is not just a culture taker. So things like that you can have, being a first year after college, person, right? So you don't have to be a VP, to basically demonstrate these skills. You don't have to be in a certain domain or function to demonstrate these skills. And we would pretty much, like Amazon has a similar concept. They call it bar raisers. So we have a team of kind of the best of the best of the best AAAs, right? And they got specific training on how to check for these criteria. And they would be the only ones, so we call it herd raiser. So the herd raiser is never from the function which is hiring, so to avoid any kind of bias. So the herd raiser is only loyal to the company. Their job is to increase our talent density, to increase our IQ, right? So they don't care about you in engineering having a resource constraint and a deadline to hit. They don't care about in sales someone needs more quota capacity. They don't know about this. They come in, they only check for AAA criteria, and they are the only ones in the entire recruiting process who have a veto. Right? Not even the hiring manager. Technically, they can, but they are the only one with a formal veto when we meet for a panel. If the herd raiser gives a no, it doesn't matter. Everyone else, people in culture, you as a hiring manager, you all gave thumbs up. If the herd raiser says no, we don't take this person. So we take it very seriously, and this served us super well. This really helped to increase quality over quantity.
That makes sense. You mentioned potential. Do you think about potential in the next 2 years, in the next 5 years? Do you think very long term when it comes to this? So when you hire the C-suite at the VP level, for how long do you hire?
Yeah, so 3 to 5 years. So this typically, when we have conversations, we try to get a feeling for, does this person has good and quantifiable enough ideas about how the future will look like, and 3 to 5 years is the time horizon.
Yeah, and
just because. So the reason for that is just because like the shelf life of experience is much shorter than what people think it is. And what you typically see, even with, especially this is very tempting when you get like a senior hire, someone comes in from a great company, from Salesforce, SAP, you're like, hey, this person has done this over and over and over again. What happens is that these people are very good in, I call it, downloading their experience into the business, especially the first 6 to 9 months, right? And achieving quick wins. So at first it looks like, hey, a lot of things are moving. But then they come to the point where they come to work and they open their experience book and the page is empty, right? There is nothing anymore. And then from that day on, they have to learn, right? They have to find new ways, right? And this is kind of the day when I start really, judging them and looking at, their potential. And the better you can come to the point, upfront and getting a feeling for, is this person rather someone who has great experience, which might be super valuable and even had led to fantastic results and whatever, IPOs, or is this a person who will do you well and serve you well in the next 3 to 5 years? Just because shelf life is so much shorter than what people think.
Yeah. And how quickly do you realize if someone hits their glass ceiling, or if someone is not working out, you made a hire, it's just not the right hire?
Yeah, I mean, especially with senior executives, obviously this is hard for a few reasons. One reason is that, of course, when you're bringing in someone for, a senior position or maybe even senior VP position, you bring them in to be better than you in whatever, the function is, right? And you don't want to end up in a fully micromanaged environment, and probably this person would otherwise leave you very soon, right? So you need to leave a certain room for autonomy, right? Which makes it a bit harder. So I think as long as what we do is we have very clear 30, 60, 90-day plans. This is where we not compromise, right? We say, hey, this is exactly, including expected outcomes and business objectives. This is where we not compromise, to make sure that the person gets the right level of ramp and the right level of connections. And this is kind of the first checkpoint. You see how well they connect, how well they absorb the information. You get a feeling for intellectual curiosity, for listening or coming up with solutions right away. So there are certain kind of traits that you see, right? If someone is not intellectually interested in getting very deep on the problem and really understanding it before coming up with a solution, but it's like, at Adobe SAP I did it, then you already know that very likely, by the time this experience will be outdated, there is nothing else coming, right? But after the 30, 60, 90 days, you definitely need to leave some room, this can be a quarter or two, and then you need to collect feedback, right? And not working out can have multiple dimensions. Not working out in terms of business results, right? So the function, or not working out, like sometimes it's culture or people. So you need to constantly keep on assessing the people. So for C-level hires, we have a very rigor process in terms of how often we interview the people reporting to this person to get a feeling for there's someone who is great, doing great in an ELT meeting, but is not showing the people and cultural skills we want. And then you need to ultimately take action.
Yeah. You mentioned culture a few times, and at Spryker you've of course built a very special culture. No one ever wants to leave Spryker, which is a good thing. What are the elements that you see as the cultural elements, and how do you manage it when new leaders come in from the outside, for them not to bring in a different culture in their respective team and create a little bit which is isolated?
Yeah, so maybe just to correct one small thing. So culture is never top down; it's always bottom up, right? So it's not like me or someone in the management team is sitting there in our ivory towers and thinking about culture. So it's always bottom up. So it is okay for people to bring in their contributions. This is why we, in the AAA criteria, as I said, are looking for what we call herd contributors. So people who are not just taking culture, but adding to it, right? And you can be a great professional and expert in your domain, but you're not adding to the culture at all, right? So this is something that we would then see in the AAA assessments and say, great expert, but probably not a good herd contributor. So once people come in, so what we don't want is we don't want functional cultures, right? We don't want subcultures to be built within the company. This we don't want, but it's okay if someone comes in and adds something to the game. For us, I think it's a good combination of very very hard work, but also having like a lot of fun, So we were always very open about, and we do have I think great parties in our office. We pull together people. I mean, we have now people in 50 countries. We bring people once a year together, and spend some time in a cool location, and have great workshops, and kind of strengthen the bonds and build new connections. We try to reinvest a lot into people, like when it comes to like learning and development, because again, capability over capacity. I think this is super important. And so far this worked out well.
Maybe the last question around senior hires and also how this permeates throughout the company. When you think about cash compensation and ESOP, like who should have ESOP, and how do you think about fixed salary versus bonus?
Yeah, this is a very philosophical, I think, question, and many people, would have their own opinion. I mean, we started initially, the pool of people who were eligible for ESOP was very narrow. Right, and then over time we expanded it more and more. Initially we started with the EOT people, then we added VP, then we added the director level. At some point we kind of broke this hierarchical assignments and said, okay, why would we? Because in our career framework we are saying that specialist roles, right, or experts, are as valuable as leadership roles. And at some point you also don't want people only to be moving into management just because they think they can earn more, they can get more. You want people to be very open and having a similar kind of trajectory, staying or being an expert or a specialist. So we added those this group as well and said, okay, as long as people are showing significant impact, right, and we wanna retain them, or we wanna add a certain element of compensation, we expanded it to individuals as well. So it's not everyone, but it's a wider group. I think kind of like impact and or retention are the two main assessments that we're having.
Maybe shifting gears a little bit. You guys went to the US in 2021. There are different philosophies around 2020. Okay, yeah. First revenues in 2020. US. That's really fair. When you hired the first team there, did you go in with a small hub of people? Did you hire them in the US versus bringing them over from Europe? Did you go in with a big bang, and what would you do differently? Lots of questions in one, but at the end of the day, that's probably what.
So this 2020 remark was important because of obviously Corona, which has disrupted kind of the plan. So the plan that we initially had, was to we spent a lot of time for finding the right spot and looking into Boston and Miami and New York and some other spots, and then decided for New York. We spent a lot of time on thinking through who would go there and how much time we would spend and how we set it all up. And then we officially opened, I think, in early 2020, like February or so. And then we were not allowed into the country for the next 2.5 years, right? So basically, the first time we were allowed in was I think last year, middle of last year. The borders were just closed, right? So the entire team that we have by now there, grew without anyone from Germany ever having been there, right? Which I think was a kind of a change in our plans. We had to adapt to that. So we started with a sales role. So we brought in a sales VP, and we and from there on, obviously this person was also hiring. Again, his plans were also disrupted because he also thought initially that he will have a space and he will hire people into the space, and obviously he couldn't do that neither. So then it kind of unfolded in a way that people across the country were hired, sales roles, BDR roles. We were from day one very very serious about the US and the US being an important market. So this is why I would call it like went all in. So we did not wait for too long, but try to bring marketing functions, sales functions, BDR functions. And by now we also have a significant part, like almost 50% of our CMVP leadership is in the US as well, so which has nothing to do with the actual go-to-market, but still is good to have some more senior leadership there.
And I mean, your situation was a very special situation.
Yeah.
If you had to do this again now, what would you do? And would you, as a founder, move over to the US as well, or would you send someone else? Like, how do you think about that?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, I mean, one thing that is now different, kind of post-corona, from how it was before, which also disrupting, I think, many playbooks, is this remote first or hybrid culture for many companies, right? So I think this is kind of also something which is here to stay, which will not change that much, right? Which we also, when I speak to people in my network, so this notion of someone goes over there, right? It really makes sense if you have like a location where you have people, or if you then just fly and visit customers, right? So again, depends on what type of a founder you are, and whether you can really help. If you're a technical founder, then maybe it doesn't help that much. So probably I would at least ensure that a significant part of the leadership team would spend a lot of time there, right? Whether this is like being full-time there or whatever kind of role-over model there would be. But again, the difference is that most likely you would not have office with all the people physically there, which was previously a big argument for ramping people, getting them up to speed on culture. As this now falls away, basically just this, I can go to customers, to partners, etc. Right? And this depends a little bit on the business that you have.
And of course, you got your product and R&D team. You're probably not going to relocate someone to the US. It's often largely a go-to-market function. When you hire, especially American salespeople, the urban myth is that everyone knows how to sell themselves better than anything else, right? So how did you go about hiring salespeople in the US, and what do you look at? And do you look at different things compared to?
Yeah, we definitely learned our lesson, I would say. So initially, when we came there, and to your point, typically what you see is that diverse salespeople are the best interviewers, right? So and there is some correlation in that. So what happens is that our assumption was, let's shortcut even further by bringing people with significant experience, right, and a significant network and Rolodex and alike. And this didn't work out for us at all, right? Like at all. So these people came in and the Rolodex were outdated. Their previous experience was rather a liability, than an asset, because it was much harder for an innovative product to kind of reteach them. People also coming in with, especially in the US, with like, hey, done that, got the t-shirt kind of mentality. So it's much harder. So this humbleness, that we might have maybe a little bit more in Europe, is not there at all. So this was a bit of a challenge for us. So this is why we now changed the approach entirely, right? I was looking for people who are representing us well in terms of like, technical understanding, brand, telling the story in a compelling way, coming with less legacy. Doesn't matter whether they've worked at Oracle like 20 years ago or not. This is, again, not a proxy for success for the future. So we are adjusting the profile now a little bit because, it didn't work well for us.
Yeah. And has your approach to, in terms of go-to-market, been totally different in the US compared to Europe, or is it similar?
So it was very similar. So we always have been very channel heavy. So channel for us, like doing business with and through partners was always important. So we replicated that. I think the main difference, which ironically, maybe in a positive way, is now swapping over to Europe as well, is that so the US was much more business objective focused. So we were used to a much more technical pitch, here. So where people would be much more like, RFP, RFI type of people, reaching out, and you need to be convinced, about your product. In the US, it was different, where people were asking much more and challenging us much more on, what is the actual outcome that I can get, and can you guarantee this? Can you validate this, right? So can you? It was and is much easier. I still find it much easier to get this chance to talk to people than in Europe, right? So from kind of the open culture itself to networking, And even within big accounts, they have this culture of working with startups, working with companies and universities. So you always get this chance to pitch and to present. So this is not, it's much easier than in Europe, right? So it's much harder. It's sometimes very hard to get into a corporate, when you're an early stage company at all. This is not the case in the US, but you need to be super crystal clear on the business objective, right? And when you start pitching kind of in feature functions, nobody listens. And the better you can validate it, the easier it is. So ironically now, because of macro, etc., now everyone is asking the same questions in Europe. So kind of it serves as a very good lesson because we had to, for example, invest and adapt our product marketing, which was very technical, very feature heavy, to a business persona, to articulating business value much clearer. And again, now we're kind of re-importing this into the go-to-market we have here because now people are asking the same questions.
And if you could give yourself from 3 years some advice, or every growth founder here, in terms of what you would do differently or what you didn't expect
for the US?
For the US, like what's the number one thing that you think about?
Yeah. So I think it definitely makes sense, especially in this kind of remote scenario. You need to have some senior leadership there, right? So ideally from the functions which you're hiring for, but worst case, if it's not even the function, but at least like 1 or 2 people who can hold this group together. It's very, very hard, also from a cultural point of view, to run this organization completely from remote. I think so. I would much earlier invest, maybe overinvest into that. I think this product marketing piece, is definitely super important. I mean, again, depending on your products, but I would definitely double click on that. I think the US market is very product marketing heavy. In fact, it's sometimes even too much. Like we know it from the movies, right? Sometimes you go to a trade show and look at all these banners and roll and say, hey, this is a kick-ass product. And then you come and talk to the people, and this is like a Mickey Mouse feature, right? And you're like, this is not a company, this is a feature that you have here. But they're very good in that. So I think you need to have these skills. So being kind of too European or too German, is definitely not good. So it's not, and people are much. So these are maybe the most important two things I would say.